Never thought I'd meet my father again. He left when I was 5. No goodbye, no letter, no calls. Just gone. One day, he was sitting at the breakfast table, ruffling my hair and telling me I was going to be a big man someday. The next, his side of the closet was empty, and my mom was crying over a half-drunk cup of coffee. From then on, his name became a curse in our home, spoken only when bills were overdue, or when I asked too many questions about why he left. 20 years passed. I'm 25 now, living in a one-bedroom apartment that smells faintly of coffee grounds and cheap takeout. Life isn't glamorous. I work at a mechanic's shop during the day, come home greasy, and spend my evenings trying to fix up an old motorcycle that's been my side project for 3 years. I don't have many friends. Trust is a hard thing to hand out when you've grown up with an empty chair at the dinner table. It started on a Tuesday. I was elbow deep in an engine, swearing at a bolt that wouldn't budge, when a man leaned over the counter at the shop and asked if I needed help. He looked to be in his late 40s, with salt and pepper hair and a worn leather jacket that probably had stories older than me. There was something about his eyes, sharp, but warm. "You're gonna strip that bolt if you keep going at it like that," he said with a grin. I smirked, trying not to let his confidence annoy me. "And you are?" "Name's Tom," he said. "Used to work on engines like these back in the day. Mind if I take a look?" I should have said no. Normally, I don't let strangers touch my work. But there was an ease in the way he asked, not pushy, just familiar. I stepped aside. He grabbed a tool from the rack like he owned the place, turned the bolt once, and it loosened like it had been waiting for him all along. "There you go," he said, wiping his hands. "Sometimes, it's not about force. It's about knowing the sweet spot." He was right, and I hated that. "Thanks," I muttered. Over the next few weeks, Tom kept showing up. Sometimes he'd drop by the shop to bring me a coffee, sometimes just to chat while I worked. I told myself it was harmless, just an older guy looking for someone to talk to. But he was different from the kind of people I usually met. He listened, really listened. When I complained about work, he didn't give me the usual, "that's life," lecture. He gave me ideas on how to fix things, or stories from his past about times he'd messed up and learned the hard way. One night, after closing up the shop, we ended up sitting in the parking lot with a couple of beers. He told me about riding cross-country in his 20s, fixing broken cars in the middle of nowhere, and sleeping under the stars. I told him about my mom, about how she raised me alone. He nodded, quiet, like he was absorbing every word. "You ever meet your dad?" he asked. The question hit harder than it should have. I shrugged. "He bailed when I was a kid. Haven't seen him since." Tom's jaw tightened, but he hid it behind a sip of beer. "That's rough. Some men don't know what they're giving up until it's too late." I didn't think much of it at the time, but looking back, maybe I should have. Things kept going like that for months. We became friends, though I never said it out loud. He taught me tricks with engines I'd never learned at the shop. He invited me to ride with him sometimes, letting me borrow his spare helmet. It was the closest thing I'd had to a father figure since, well, ever. And then, everything started to unravel the night he came over to help me with my motorcycle. It was late. The streets outside were quiet, and my tiny garage was lit by a single buzzing bulb. Tom leaned over the bike, pointing out where I'd been going wrong. At one point, he laughed and said, "You're stubborn, just like your old man." I froze. My hands went still on the wrench. "What did you just say?" Tom's smile faltered. "Nothing, just a saying." "No," I said, standing straighter. "You said I was stubborn like my old man. How the hell would you know what my dad was like?" He hesitated. For the first time since I'd met him, Tom looked nervous. His fingers drummed on the edge of the bike like he was stalling for time. "I knew him," he said finally. I narrowed my eyes. "Knew him? How?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. It was like watching a man wrestle with a decision he didn't want to make. "It's complicated. Try me." That's when he stepped back, ran a hand over his face, and said quietly, "Because I am your father." It was like the air got sucked out of the room. My ears rang. I actually laughed, a short, sharp, humorless sound, because what else do you do when someone drops a bomb like that? "You're joking." "I'm not," he said, his voice steady now. "I left 20 years ago, and I've regretted it every single day since. I didn't know how to face you. I didn't think you'd even want to see me. So I came back as a friend, just, hoping I could still be in your life somehow." I stared at him, my mind reeling. Memories I'd buried, him lifting me onto his shoulders at the fair, the way his laugh used to sound, came rushing back, crashing into the man standing in front of me now. Why? I asked finally, my voice shaking. Why did you leave? His eyes darkened. Because I was a coward. Your mom and I fought a lot. Money was tight. I thought you'd be better off without me. I told myself I'd come back when I had my life together, but the years slipped away. I wanted to yell at him. I wanted to hit him. Instead, I just turned away, gripping the edge of the workbench until my knuckles went white. You don't get to just walk back into my life like this, I said. You don't get to pretend to be my friend and then drop this on me. I know, he said softly. But I couldn't stay away any longer. I didn't answer. The silence between us felt heavier than the years he'd been gone. For 3 days, I didn't answer his calls. Didn't reply to his texts. Didn't even open the shop door when I saw him standing outside. I needed time to think, though thinking is a generous word for what I was doing. Mostly, I just sat in my apartment staring at the wall, replaying every moment we'd shared these past months. Every coffee he brought me, every story he told, every laugh we shared, all of it was poison now, tangled up with the fact that it had all been a lie. On the 4th day, I came home to find him sitting on the steps outside my building. His leather jacket was zipped up to his chin, but he looked cold anyway, like the wind had been chewing at him for hours. You gonna let me in, or should I keep freezing? He asked. Part of me wanted to turn around and walk away. But another part, the part one hated, still remembered the guy who'd shown me how to loosen that stubborn bolt. I sighed and unlocked the door. Inside, I tossed him a beer without asking if he wanted one. He caught it, opened it, and took a long drink before speaking. I get why you're angry, he said. I'd be furious if I were you. But I didn't come here to make excuses. Good, I snapped. Because there's no excuse for what you did. He nodded slowly, as if agreeing with me hurt. You're right. There isn't. I left because I was selfish. I thought disappearing would solve everything, but it just made everything worse. I've had 20 years to regret that decision, and every single day I've wondered what kind of man you were growing up. I slammed my beer down on the table. And instead of being honest, you decided to play this sick game. Pretend to be my friend so you could, what? Warm me up before you dropped the truth. No, he said quickly. I was afraid you'd slam the door in my face if I came to you as your father. I thought if you got to know me without the history, maybe you'd see I'm not the same man who left.
And so it did. Outwardly, the Roosevelts remained together. But Eleanor made one thing known. Things would never be the same. Their personal bond was shattered, but something else began to take its place. A partnership forged not in love, but in ambition, ideals, and legacy. What the world didn't know, what history almost forgot, was that from this moment of betrayal, a new Eleanor emerged. She would no longer play the role of silent spouse, smiling for the cameras. She would find her own voice, and it would change the nation. Behind the White House doors, Eleanor became more independent. She started writing, speaking, traveling alone. Her pain, still private, became fuel for something far bigger. While Franklin climbed the ladder toward the presidency, Eleanor built her own path, one rooted in justice, equality, and truth. But she never spoke of the affair. Not once. To the public, they were America's golden couple. Behind closed doors, there was something more complex, two people bound by duty, history, and secrets. Eleanor chose silence, not because she was weak, but because she understood power. And sometimes, power means knowing when not to speak. By the time Franklin D. Roosevelt became president in 1933, the private betrayal Eleanor endured had long been sealed in silence. The affair with Lucy Mercer had supposedly ended, their marriage salvaged, at least in the eyes of the public. But inside the White House, behind the polished smiles and iconic photo ops, Eleanor was not a traditional first lady. And This was not a traditional marriage. Eleanor had made a silent pact with herself. If she was going to stay in this marriage, she would not remain in her husband's shadow. She would not simply decorate the East Wing, host teas, and smile at diplomats. She would use her platform to speak, to act, to advocate. And she did. In the early years of Franklin's presidency, Eleanor began traveling the country, often alone, visiting coal miners, factory workers, poor, farmers, and black communities suffering under the weight of the Great Depression. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait to be invited. She went where the pain was and brought the stories back to Washington. She lobbied her husband to care, to act, to intervene. In many ways, Eleanor became the conscience of the Roosevelt administration. And yet she never spoke a word about Lucy Mercer. It wasn't because she had forgiven Franklin. It was because Eleanor had learned something few women of her time were allowed to understand: that strength could exist outside of marriage, that she could define herself without him, even while standing beside him. Their personal relationship had become almost entirely political and parental. They raised their children. They supported each other's ambitions. But emotionally, they were distant islands. She lived in a separate part of the White House. She had her own schedule, her own staff, her own life. She wrote a daily newspaper column, gave speeches across the country, and worked closely with civil rights leaders and labor unions. Eleanor was a first lady like no other, outspoken, independent, and deeply empathetic. People whispered. Political elites frowned. But the public? They adored her. Still, Lucy never truly disappeared. Whispers of Lucy Mercer's continued presence in Franklin's life lingered through the years. It was said that while Eleanor traveled, Franklin still exchanged letters with Lucy, that she was there quietly during some of his most difficult moments. Some even claimed she was with him when he died. But Eleanor never confronted her again. Not in public, not in writing. Instead, she channeled every ounce of her betrayal into purpose. Every insult she swallowed became another reason to speak out against injustice. Every moment she stood alone became a reminder that her strength was hers, and hers alone. She often said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." She lived those words every.
The back of his bike, roaring down the highway with the wind in my face. It wasn't a magic fix. There were still moments I'd look at him and feel the old anger bubbling up. Still nights I'd wonder if trusting him again was a mistake. But then there were other moments, like the time he drove 2 hours in the rain just to bring me a part one needed for a customer's car, that made me think maybe people can change. Months later, I asked him why he hadn't just stayed gone. He looked at me with those same sharp, warm eyes I'd noticed the first day we met. "Because I realized," he said, "that running away once was the worst thing I ever did. Running away twice would have been unforgivable." I didn't say it out loud, but in that moment, I knew I wasn't going to let him run again. Maybe we'll never have the kind of father-son relationship other people take for granted. But we have something. And for now, that's enough.